It is now the 3rd of February, and Moscow City is suddenly coming under a heavy attack. Boom, bada boom, boom, boom.
Boom.
An emergency evacuation of the business center is starting right now. Thousands of employees are fleeing their workplaces. The Ukrainian armed forces are striking the centers of Moscow and St. Petersburg with Western missiles.
Whoa, that hit hard. Damn, man. Holy shit, fuck.
At this very moment, Moscow City is switching its employees to remote work. Only security and a couple of duty staff remain in the central VTB office. All this is happening against the backdrop of drone attacks and the threat of direct hits on the tower.
Guys, I was born under a lucky star.
American JASSM missiles will be heading for the Kremlin. Moscow City is under attack. An emergency evacuation of the business center is starting right now. Thousands of employees are being let out from their workplaces. Trump has authorized strikes on Muscovites. St. Petersburg,
Moscow and the Moscow region are being attacked by Ukrainian drones. Boom, bada boom.
Hey there, Bomb. I was just calling to check in and see if you have finally managed to arrive at your destination yet, Donald.
Trump privately suggested to Zelenskyy to strike Moscow and St. Petersburg. The new US president is convinced that only strikes on Russian cities will force the Kremlin to enter negotiations. At this very moment, Moscow City is switching employees to remote work at the VTB central office. Only security and a couple of duty staff remain. All this is happening against the backdrop of new drone attacks and the threat of direct hits on the towers. And all this is a new phase of the war. And we see how, for the first time, Russia is truly afraid. What kind of signal did Trump send? Which missiles could be supplied to Ukraine? JSMs or Tomahawks? Why is Putin running and why is Moscow trembling? We'll discuss all this with top analyst Alexander Demchenko right now. Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Sasha and I work together twice a week on my YouTube channel. Sasha, the most important question, what happens now?
Strikes on Moscow. In the coming days, Moscow is preparing for a reason. Moscow City is being evacuated. Everyone is switching to remote work. It's not just official sources, Z-bloggers, war correspondents, even the official authorities, the military, generals. They've started saying that yes, there will be a strike, a combined missile and drone strike directly on Moscow. In other words, they're preparing for retaliation, for a harsh response. We discussed with you literally this week that a harsh response is expected any day now. I said before, 10 days, wait, there will be a response. Well, here you go. And I gave it 10 days. And as you can see, I was right. I assessed the situation a bit more accurately, perhaps, than even Donald Trump. That's just a joke, by the way. The point is, there will be a response, there will be a harsh strike. Moscow is preparing for this. Most likely, for the first time, Moscow will be set ablaze. All those fat cats, all of Rubliovka will be burning. They don't feel the war over there. You see, a lot of people here ask me, but they're hitting Kyiv. No, very often representatives of the Russian political immigrants ask me this question. They're hitting Kyiv, but Kyiv keeps working, standing, living, and so on. I say yes, but Kyiv feels that the war has long since come to the Ukrainian capital. But Moscow doesn't feel it yet. It will feel it soon. 100%. Everyone will feel it. Dmitry Medvedev, who, after getting drunk, started talking about how Trump is just decorative with his statements. The only one who's decorative is Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev himself, both in terms of height, intellectual abilities, and in how he managed to squander power in a single night, and in his cowardice, he's decorative. And especially in how now, as he sucks up to Putin, he's afraid he'll be taken out. A tweet here, a tweet there, you see. One moment he criticizes Trump, the next he praises him. Everything depends on Vladimir Putin's mood, a man who squandered power in a single night, and handed it over to Putin and Patrushev by the lake. Gave up power in one night, afraid he'd be drowned. In just one night. And now he talks about being decorative. There is no one more decorative in the Russian power structure than Dmitry Medvedev. You can just remember this for the rest of your life. Just carve it in stone for yourself wherever you like. That's the first point. Second, of course, the fact that they are now moving not just military enterprises to remote work, but also Moscow City, the elite complex with office spaces where Viktor Yanukovych's son has offices, where Kurchenko has offices, where a huge number of Russian security officials, FSB officers have offices, where Bashar Assad and his family have apartments. This is significant. This suggests that most likely they are going to shoot them down. They want to shoot them down and they don't care where they do it. It's obvious that the goal is to prevent drones from hitting the Kremlin or any other important military targets, military facilities, like the general staff on Frunzenskaya near Arbat. Well, it's right on Arbat, actually. So what we've been talking about and predicting with you, Dasha, over the past weeks and months, it's starting to come true. Many people thought maybe we were crazy, making things up. No. Well, there you go. Now drones and missiles will be flying. It's not just Daria and I saying this about the situation. That's what they're saying over there in Russia. Gerasimov is saying it. That whole propaganda pack is proclaiming it. Everyone. Absolutely everyone. There you have it. Moscow will speak up. What does Trump say? Why aren't you striking Moscow? You said it right in the preview. Why aren't you striking Moscow? There's no weapons. Give us weapons and we'll strike. All right. But then don't just strike Moscow, hit St. Petersburg too. So the Americans are raising the stakes. It's just that Putin went all in and Aram thought, well, fine, but I have more Zaris. My last name translates as goats. So I'll come in with my own. And he did. And now he's already considering transferring Tomahawks to Ukraine. And that's the weapon that pierced 2 nuclear facilities in Iran. Tomahawks, 30 Tomahawks. There are no longer 2 nuclear plants in Iran. So why do we think there can't be several nuclear plants on Russian territory? After a Tomahawk strike? That's the point right here. Air-to-air missiles and ballistic missiles will be sent to Ukraine. And we're saying that most likely Donald Trump gave a signal, quite a public one without any ambiguity, showing everything, demonstrating it to Vladimir Putin. Catastrophic strikes on Moscow will follow. And now there will be combined strikes, drones, missiles. They'll simply turn off the lights over Moscow. And they'll turn off the lights over Russia as well. And over Vladimir Putin's regime too. That will happen as well. The lights will go out there too. It's long overdue. And if even Trump is asking, so why aren't you striking? That means the idea has probably already formed in his mind. A 100% clear idea. Why not do something to make things unpleasant for Vladimir Putin? Surely that's what they're betting on. So I expect a major fire in the center of Moscow in the near future. Absolutely everything will burn. And that's already inevitable. They themselves invited this disaster into their home when they started the war. They themselves invited this disaster into their home when they once again chose Vladimir Putin, when they helped him dismantle the constitution, when they helped him orchestrate Bucha, Hostomel, Irpin, Trostianets, Mariupol, and the rest. They are the ones to blame for this. They brought this nightmare upon themselves. Now it won't just be hellish sanctions, now it will be hell on earth. Donald Trump had once promised a literal hell on earth for Iran. But that hell on earth ended up descending upon Vladimir Putin instead.
Friends, write in the comments what you think about the potential transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. That really would be a decisive game changer. Sasha, let me add a bit of a fly in the ointment to our barrel of honey. Many military analysts immediately wrote that Trump simply allowed Putin to seize the entire Donbas to continue his military actions, his offensive. The invader carried out his terrorist operation, and only then did he do something on video. In other words, there were some kind of agreements between Trump and Putin. Take what you need, and then we impose sanctions. What do you say to that?
You see, it just doesn't work that way. If there had been a secret deal between Trump and Putin, the NATO Secretary General wouldn't have been in Washington. There wouldn't have been any negotiations. There wouldn't have been anything between the Europeans and Trump. None of this would have happened, and no one would have given anything to Ukraine. In backroom deals, things are arranged completely differently. First of all, the arms shipment has to arrive. Let me remind you that Trump gave Iran 60 days. On the 61st day, the Israelis launched a strike. But for that strike to happen, everything had to be in place. That included American carrier groups having to move in as well. American fighter jets had to move in, along with American reconnaissance planes. American intelligence data and the intelligence services had to work to figure out who was where and how they were positioned. Where, in which bunker, is Ayatollah Khamenei hiding? It's the same situation here. Stockpile weapons, accumulate systems, acquire anti-missile systems. And then to carry out strikes, retaliatory strikes, in response to what Vladimir Putin will do. And yes, of course, Putin will strike. It's clear that he will try to advance in the Donbas. These are just more of the same things, really. But in 3.5 years of war, Putin has not been able to seize the Donbas. And in fact, since 2014, he hasn't been able to take the Donbas. That's the first point. The second, obviously, it's necessary to reach an agreement with India and China. Because right now, Trump is negotiating both with the Indians and with the Chinese. And these negotiations are about tariffs. So here, the issue is trade. Lavrov came to Beijing after visiting North Korea, as you know. So right now, Lavrov is in Beijing. And he's holding talks with Xi Jinping, and the Chinese side has said that it will support Russia even more. Well, fine, they'll give more support, but they'll get sanctions in return. But we're not talking about sanctions against Russia. We're talking about secondary sanctions. Sanctions against China, against India, against buyer countries, against companies and legal entities that purchase oil and gas from Russia. They buy nuclear fuel, they buy electricity, they buy coal, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about. Secondary sanctions targeting countries and buyers that allow the Russian oil fleet to operate, to sell everything under the sun, and to facilitate, to allow even shadow deals to go through and to let goods pass through this or that country. Turkey, for example, Azerbaijan, Central Asia, China as well, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about certain countries in the European community. That's what we're talking about. And which side are they taking? Officially, definitively, so that everyone understands the game already. And thirdly, listen, in September, the official procedure for adopting the federal state budget begins. We need to understand whether Vladimir Putin will make any moves or not. What appropriations, what funds to allocate, what to allocate them for, how much to allocate to Ukraine for concrete opposition to Putin, and what Putin will do. It's necessary now to assess the behavior of the Kremlin dictator, the Russian troops, and so on. What will happen next? Once they've assessed, they'll strike. There is simply no other way out of this situation. Vladimir Putin himself has overturned the board. I think he now deeply regrets it. He's biting his nails, his elbows, and everything else he can bite. But the problem is, Dasha, that he himself is to blame for this situation. He overdid it. He ruined everything, as the New York Times rightly pointed out. Now, very difficult and catastrophic times await Putin. There's another reason as well, Dasha. Putin started purging his elite at the wrong time. He killed the Minister of Transport, Starovoyt. He went after the Kemezov clan, who until recently was his friend. He started cracking down once again on the Shoigu and Patrushev clans, and so on. He started going after them again. And these repressive measures are gaining more and more momentum. He started destroying his elite at the wrong time, because right now the elite should be united. And when half of the elite fears for their lives, when ministers, 9 people, vote with their feet, vice premiers, ministers, top officials vote with their feet and come to the funeral, to Starovoytovas, and Putin mocks them, first saying a wreath was sent, then taking his words back, and they realize that, well, fine, now Lubyanka will come after their asses too. So what we're talking about is that there will be pressure from Trump, an economic problem in Russia, a mess, and at the same time, possibly the beginning of some kind of coup. Because the oligarchs who bankroll these ministers, the officials, the military leadership, they all understand perfectly well that Putin started the first battle, that Putin struck the first blow against them. If they don't respond, they're finished. Now, Trump will apply pressure, and they will too, and they'll destabilize the situation. I don't know, Dasha, whether we'll wake up tomorrow or the day after to the news that tanks have entered Moscow, surrounded the Kremlin, and Putin is gone. A coup in Russia. Hooray, I don't know. But the fact is, they will act and watch to see how hard Trump goes after Putin, and they'll base their actions on that. That's a fact. This is probably one of the most turbulent periods of this war throughout the entire conflict. It won't be easy. It will be turbulent. At times it will be tough. But for Putin, in the end, it will end badly. These are fateful days for the war. For Ukraine, yes. But these are dark and grim days for Vladimir Putin. Trump has no other choice. To use Margarita Simonian's words, he simply can't back down. He just can't anymore. And Putin will choke on him. And that's Vladimir Putin's fault. He himself is to blame for what happened.
Sasha, missiles and tomahawks, are those really coming in the next few months, or is that all still unrealistic for now?
This is Trump raising the stakes. This is blackmail against Putin. Trump has shown him several times what the system is like, hasn't he? Tomahawk, what Tomahawk missiles are. He demonstrated this once in Syria, when he destroyed, just completely wrecked, the Syrian bases where Russian soldiers and Russian aircraft were stationed. He showed what American weapons are capable of with the example of the Wagner mercenaries, whom he wiped out as well. He showed what Tomahawks are with the example of Iran. And now he's saying this. That's it, I'll send Tomahawks to both Zelenskyy and Ukraine. Hundreds of them, take your pick. In other words, he's raising the stakes, but he doesn't want the war to actually turn into a truly global, large-scale one. He doesn't want to fight Putin directly, but he probably has to do it or will have to. But for now, he's just raising the stakes to the max, to the limit. Trump has a higher ceiling of possibilities. He has more room to maneuver, you see? He's showing Putin, I can even give tomahawks. And you have nothing to counter these tomahawks with. The patriots are mine. Those are my patriots. I have the best anti-missiles, and you don't have them. If there's already been a strike on Siberia, and Siberia is burning, I don't know, for the second or third time, just in the last month, Dasha. You see, before the territory of Russia, that was an asset. A huge territory. It was almost impossible to get all the way through, right? You'd get to the Urals and then just wander off. Somewhere out there, you'd just spit and turn back home. Now, Russia's vast territory is actually a disadvantage. It's a negative factor because it's impossible to cover it with anti-drone or anti-missile systems. You see? Impossible. That's why they'll cover Putin again. They'll protect him from behind near the Kremlin while all of Moscow will be burning. They'll cover St. Petersburg and Siberia will be burning. You see? So tomahawks are a real possibility in the future. And when Putin says no, that's it, then most likely he will say no. He simply has no other option left to show weakness. Weakness. He can't show his security forces on whom he depends and who are the foundation of all his power that, guys, I chickened out, I can't do it. He will go all the way to the end. He will keep making mistake after mistake. But Trump will keep pressing further and further, together with the Europeans and everyone else. Ultimately, we will reach a situation where China will have to get directly and openly involved. Directly and openly involved. And we are already approaching that situation.
Everyone has already written that Sevastopol is starting to heat up. Pro-Russian public pages in occupied Crimea, they write that Trump might strike Sevastopol with replacements, Tomahawks, Medjazm missiles. They write that, according to the latest comments, Trump is also considering supplying Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. They can hit Moscow and St. Petersburg. Panic is starting in the Kremlin. Propagandists are already howling. So this is exactly the tension zone that is now developing very strongly in Russian military public pages. Tell me.
And notice, Dash, Trump hasn't supplied anything yet. You see, that's a skill in itself. He hasn't done anything yet. The Moscow Stock Exchange is starting to fall. He hasn't done anything yet, and the public pages are already howling. He hasn't done anything yet, and already half of Moscow is being evacuated in Russia. He hasn't done anything yet, and already problems are starting in Crimea. And there aren't even any Tomahawks yet. And now, attention, friends, imagine the situation. There are Tomahawks, and the Tomahawks are being launched. Just multiply this hysteria by 10 or even 100. Multiply it. They'll go crazy. They aren't even here yet. And they're already starting to talk about how it's all for show. But when they do arrive, they simply won't know what to do. They'll all just disappear. As soon as the Tomahawks start flying toward Moscow, the first person who won't be in Moscow is Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev. He'll fly away. And that's already happened before. You may laugh, but that's how it was. When Prigozhin was marching on Moscow through the Rostov region, who was the first to run away? Everyone else stayed. No one understood anything. Everyone stayed at their posts. Everyone was afraid. Who ran away? Putin and Medvedev. Putin and Medvedev. Putin took Medvedev by the hand because according to the constitution, if anything happens, Medvedev also has a lifetime term. He's untouchable. Medvedev. The only president who is untouchable besides Putin is Medvedev. He took Medvedev by the hand, like a bride, and flew off with him in some unknown direction to some kind of bunker. And this time, as soon as Tomahawks or something else start flying toward Moscow or anywhere else, Medvedev will disappear immediately. He'll be gone right away because everything about him is just for show. Dmitry Medvedev.
Sasha, did you notice how, the NATO Secretary General totally trolled and mocked Medinsky during the negotiations when they were discussing things with Trump? That was really harsh. So Trump was trying to explain, like, I call Putin, Putin says everything is fine. Then my wife Melania tells me they're bombing Kiev. What's so fine about that? And I believed him. But then the NATO Secretary General Rutte says to him, how can you believe them if they send Medinsky to spout nonsense over there? Historical, pseudo-historical nonsense about Russia?
No, what they said was that Putin sent some crazy historian who started talking about the history of Russia, beginning from the year 1245. So obviously Trump, at some point, someone told him about Medinsky, and then he just forgot about him. Medinsky is not the kind of person you need to remember, honestly. And Medinsky's books are not the kind of books you need to keep rereading. But it's just that, once again, Trump was shown that Putin sends some random people to negotiations and doesn't take the talk seriously. Seriously. What does that tell us? It tells us that sooner or later, if Putin is told directly, look, if you go to negotiations, no more Medinskys. From now on, only the key big shots, people who make decisions, and you personally. I won't accept anything else. There's no room left for maneuvering, Dasha. You can't send Medinsky anymore. You can't send some random person from who knows what department or some advisor of yours. You can't. Only top-level representatives. And only you personally. Where your signature is at the end. A peace agreement and so on. Because Putin was basically given an ultimatum. Either a peace agreement with Zelenskyy within 50 days, or I'll tear you and your regime to pieces. That's all that was conveyed to him. As for Melania Trump, we need to urgently check if she has any Ukrainian roots. I think that person sitting there, I can just picture this scene. I don't know, I can just picture this scene. Trump comes home tired after work. He saw soccer there for the first time. There he visited a stadium, cut some ribbon, drank some Coca-Cola, pressed the red button, and they brought him a Coke. The man is tired. He comes home, goes up to the second floor of the White House, comes in, and Melania says, I had a wonderful conversation with Vladimir, with Putin. She says, can you imagine, Donald? They hit Kiev, they hit Lutsk. So I think we finally found the person who really knows the geography of Ukraine well.
Sasha, am I wrong? That Melania Trump is a close friend of Sasha Nikolenko, Miss Ukraine, who is married?
Who was at the inauguration?
Yes, and they even lived in the same room during the pageant. And if I'm not mistaken, it was actually Melania Trump who introduced Alexandra Nikolaenko, the Ukrainian Miss Ukraine, to her future husband, who later became her husband and business partner of Donald Trump. As I understand it, if Melania Trump has any affection for Ukraine, it's specifically connected to Sasha Nikolaenko since they're friends. And since Melania is European, she should generally be familiar with European geography because she's not American. This is about how he fights against migrants, even though his wife isn't American and was born in Europe.
You see, for example, I personally wouldn't have made that connection regarding Sasha Nikolenko, but if that's the case, then I want to tell you that both Melania and Trump himself actually have a daily overview of Ukraine and the Ukrainian situation. And that's good. If he has already said this directly, it means that this information is reaching him. And that's also good. That's good, really.
Of course, we still need to discuss Putin's actions with you. After taking all of these various factors into careful consideration, it is clear that you have successfully conveyed the core meaning and the specific nuances of Dmitry Medvedev's recent social media post with an absolute and impressive level of accuracy, which ultimately concludes with the definitive remark, "This is exactly what Medvedev stated in his official message." But here's the question. What will Putin do if Medvedev declares that Russia doesn't care, meaning it doesn't give a damn about all of Trump's words and all his threats?
Putin does care. Putin will now try in these 50 days to restore contact with Trump. But at the same time, he will strike at Ukraine. These are two things that at first glance seem completely unrelated, but that's how it will be. In the end, nothing will work out for him. Listen, Trump negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He talked to them, his representatives met with them. In the media, everyone was told that he was putting direct pressure on Netanyahu. But in the end, it turned out that Mossad carried out 3 brilliant military special operations together with Israel's military intelligence, Amman. Then it turned out that Trump gathered troops and struck Iran. Putin can do whatever he wants to do. But weapons went to Ukraine, and missiles will go to Russia, to Moscow first and foremost. So what is Vladimir Putin doing today, Dasha? That's what's interesting. We're missing this. So what is Vladimir Putin doing today? Russia launches a drone that first flies into Ukrainian territory, then turns into Belarusian territory, flies through Belarus, and then returns from Belarusian territory, supposedly as if it's a Belarusian drone flying into Ukraine to strike Chernihiv or Kyiv from the north. Once again, Vladimir Putin wanted to provoke this situation and do everything possible to pull Lukashenko away from the Americans, from Trump, to break that connection. What does Lukashenko do? Attention. Lukashenko suddenly sends up a helicopter and destroys the drone at the border, the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. What does this tell us? This shows that Vladimir Putin still wants to drag Lukashenko into this war, to do everything so that Lukashenko would be neutralized, to gain control over Belarus and use its territory to send his army through, to use Belarus as a staging ground, either against NATO forces in the east, more precisely in the west, or directly for Putin, or directly against Ukraine, the north. But Dasha, we're talking about the fact that Vladimir Putin understands perfectly well that Lukashenko is backing out, that Lukashenko is trying to distance himself, that Lukashenko doesn't want to be tied together. Now with Putin, Lukashenko has started actively flirting with Trump, and that Lukashenko has been promised something. And what he was promised is very tempting. And Lukashenko doesn't want to lose sight of that tempting offer. He doesn't want to. But Putin really wants Lukashenko to break away from Trump. Did you notice? Here is one of the most important pieces of news that came from Trump, apart from the topic of Ukraine, during his speech in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte and the NATO Secretary General. It was stated as follows, that the United States is directly influencing and was the party that reconciled, that began the process of reconciliation and drafting a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In other words, it's Trump who is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. America is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. So we wondered why all of this is happening. Trump, this is why all of this is happening. So attention, Daria. Finland, Sweden, NATO bases, Petersburg is surrounded. Troops are practically at the doorstep, NATO troops near Petersburg. Soon there will be a border breakthrough. At the same time, British and French troops will be in Ukraine, along with troops from 28 other NATO member countries, after the end, or rather after the beginning, of the ceasefire, the so-called silence regime. Attention, there will be a Turkish NATO base in Azerbaijan. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian military base in Gyumri, Armenia, disappears. If Armenia decides to shut down all Russian bases on its territory. What do I think? I think that Vladimir Putin, who has clearly realized that he won't get Ukraine no matter how hard he tries, and he wants to drag out the war. But it's one thing when you play a game of depleting Ukraine's supplies and resources, and quite another when you're trying to exhaust America's supplies and resources. They're not comparable. You have far fewer resources. You will lose this war. If Trump gets involved, and he has, so he'll be looking for other opportunities for himself. I think we need to consider two options, or rather three options. The first option is a full-scale attempt to occupy Belarus and to eliminate the Lukashenko regime and Lukashenko himself. The second is a direct attempt at destabilization. The first is Armenia, and possibly even an attempt to occupy Armenia. And the third scenario is the start of a military campaign against Georgia. I think in the near future we may witness these scenarios unfold. Putin will choose one of these scenarios for himself because the population, the masses, need something to be shown on television. Now, this is what they will be showing. This.
Sasha, a quick side note. There's been an entire article published about Melania Trump. As they say, we're at the forefront. The Times has published a big article. Zelenskyy has gained an unexpected ally in the White House, Melania Trump. According to the publication, she actively reminds Trump about the victims of Russian strikes. In February 2020, she publicly called the killing of peaceful Ukrainians terrible, tragic murders of innocent Ukrainians. While Trump called Putin smart and brilliant, Melania called him a monster. She constantly appealed to her followers, urging them to help Ukraine. She has much more political influence over her husband than previously thought. It is noted that despite the presence of numerous security and foreign policy advisors, her voice can be decisive. Trump listens to certain people, especially those who are close to him, even more so if their last name is Trump. Sasha, what do you think?
I would say that we've gained an unexpected ally. No one expected this. We've gained an unexpected ally. And honestly, Daria, that's really good news. You know, all of this is actually very pleasant because for a long time, Ukraine has been searching for ways and approaches how to convince Trump. And it turns out there wasn't really any need to search that hard. It turned out that there's the first lady who can just bypass everyone else, come straight up and say, Donald, it's time to be done with Volodya Putin, end it with him. I don't like him. And as it turns out for Trump, that's enough. That's much more than any negotiations with Putin. More than any persuasion from the Senate, Congress, and so on. More than Elon Musk, who's half crazy. It turns out that Melania and Trump are quite enough. That's very good news for Ukraine, Dash, really. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know what level of influence she'll have, how she will continue to support or not support Ukraine. But as things stand today, if thanks to Melania and Trump, Ukraine receives missiles, deadly ones, full protection of its skies, 17 Patriots, and even Tomahawk missiles, they should erect a monument to them in the center of Kyiv and name a street after Melania Trump.
Yes, you're right, Sasha. And most importantly, as you always say, what? Putin did certain things with his underwear and slapped Trump across the face. And The Atlantic completely agrees with you, because The Atlantic also wrote about it. The Atlantic, about the reasons for the increased US aid to Ukraine. Putin humiliated Trump officially, just humiliated Trump officially. And Trump can't get over it. Here you go, public humiliation.
I think, by the way, Trump even told Melania about it. He's just humiliating you.
And
that's where it all ended, you see? And then things started moving again. Here we are talking and things are moving. But what's the conclusion? The movement has started. They wanted action. They can't live without it. Well, here you go. Get your action, take it.
Sasha, the news doesn't stop even while we're streaming with you. Germany might buy a launcher from the US. a typhoon for launching Tomahawk missiles. As I understand it, Tomahawks have become our new buzzword, it seems. Now we talk only about
them. Dasha, what does this indicate? It indicates that Trump has broken loose. Now he's going to blackmail Putin every single day. Remember, Solovyov was recently shouting about two Poseidons that would drown America with a nuclear wave. Just a few days ago, Solovyov was shouting about this. There's no need for a Solovyov in America. They have Trump. Now Trump has more different kinds of weapons than Russia does. Now Trump will tell absolutely everyone in the world every day about the best, most powerful weapon systems and how Russia will burn with the help of these weapon systems. Now imagine 50 days of this. 50 days of this targeted informational bombardment of the Kremlin, the Medvedevs, and everyone else. There's a good chance that even before these 50 days are up, someone in the Kremlin will throw up their hands, because they probably won't be able to withstand such an information attack. Honestly, they'll probably soil themselves first.
Sasha, to sum up, what do you think will happen in Europe? Right now, Germany is being called Ukraine's main ally because almost all supplies will go through Germany. That's very important. NSEC, NATO, Mark Luthers has also done a lot. Once again, Fico is having a fit, Orban and others too. Now even Malta is joining in. Basically, Russian enclaves in Europe. What should we do? And will oil prices finally go down? With
these guys, Trump will deal with them if Putin actually pushes him to the end. Because if anyone does, it's Trump, who has direct influence over both Orban and Fico. Moreover, if he turns a blind eye to certain things, the European Union will put the squeeze on them. For example, when Germany stops supplying cars from Hungary, Orban will raise the white flag and say, I agree to everything. So, this has happened before. When he was blackmailed with cars, with automobiles, he immediately made all the necessary pro-Ukrainian decisions. Do you remember that situation when former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz told him to take a walk in the hallway while the vote was going on? He might have to take a walk more than once if necessary. A lot has actually changed in the last few days. The board has been flipped over. We still don't fully understand that this is a new stage of the war. And this stage is clearly not in Vladimir Putin's favor. A lot has changed. The pace is just insane. It's a terrifying pace. There was a similar pace at the beginning of the Great War. At the start of the invasion, probably in the first 6 months to a year. What we're seeing now is a new momentum. Everyone was hoping there would be some kind of reconciliation. There was hope. Trump probably had that hope too. Or rather, not hope, but an illusion. He probably had that too. Or thoughts that he could make a deal with Putin, that there would be a deal, and basically he could even profit from Russia. The deal is over. The illusions are over. And now there's a new impulse. Trump probably liked the idea of going to war. Trump probably liked the image of a burning Moscow. I don't know how long that image will stay in his mind. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 years. I don't know. But that he will take it out on Putin, that's 100%. What percent chance is there of what will happen in Russia now? Flames. What will happen in America now? A desire to start that fire. What will happen in Europe now? A desire to help start that fire. What will happen in Ukraine now? A new impulse, a new hope, after all, that Vladimir Putin's regime will collapse. And I am incredibly happy about this, because I repeat every single time, freedom and hope. These are the last things Vladimir Putin could try to take from us, but he will never succeed.
a wonderful ending, dear audience. Sasha and I work for you in the Dasha plus Sasha, Sasha plus Dasha format twice a week. Write a few kind words in support of our tandem. I know that you write a lot of comments. There are so many different comments. I read them, I give them hearts, so thank you very much. Let us know where you're watching from. Share your viewing geography. Every Tuesday, Sunday, Wednesday, Monday, we are on my YouTube channel, Dasha Shaslivaya, and on Dmitry Gordon's YouTube channel, top analyst Alexander Demchenko. Stash, thank you very much. And see you already this weekend.
Until next time, bye.